Let's get into our panel discussion. So we're going to break these two panels up into really two elements. The first is problem statements. So you're going to hear from our local transit leaders. And then the second is going to talk about issues at hand. We're going to get into the advocacy around some of these issues that we are trying to confront. So guys, I want to begin, I think the best way to begin is at the sort of the start. So kind of introduce yourself in your role. Bill, we'll start with you.
Sure. I'm Bill Kennis, and I'm the director of Benzie Transportation. Smallest county in the state of Michigan, Crystal Lake. We're known for Crystal Lake. And I've been there for 4 years, and we pride ourselves on being innovative and trying to get our customers where they need to go, which are the urban pockets of Manistee and Traverse City.
Cool. All right. Peter, if you want to go next, I know you have a couple slides, so maybe just introduce yourself. We'll come back to you.
Okay, thank you. I'm Peter Varga. I'm CEO of the Rapid, and I've been a leader there for 21 years. I worked there since 1993. I got 132 more days there, and then I'm moving on to something different. It's going to be interesting future because I think we have a lot of disruption and we have a lot of challenges, and I'll touch on some of them in my presentation.
And Mark?
So I'm Mark DeLaverne, the Chief Mobility Innovation for Mayor Duggan. The mayor started this office a little over a year ago around the idea that we're investing a lot in traditional means of getting people around, both with regards to the work that DDOT is doing on our bus system as well as our infrastructure, but also wanted to say, how do we start to integrate new types of services and technologies into the way that we're doing, and in a way that we're layering stuff and not just doing shiny objects that don't really build to a larger whole. So that is my role.
Awesome. So how we're going to do this, because I want it to be as interactive as possible. You have question cards at your table. So if you want to just do it the old-fashioned way, write it down on this blue card, wave it around, and someone will come over, pick up the card, and hand it to me. Or you could text me. So text me the question, and I will say, for example, oh, we got a question from the 248, and then I'll read the question. And this seems to work pretty well.
Is that literally your phone number?
That's really my phone number. I'm trusting all of you. So with that, Peter wanted to give us 2 or 3 minutes to kind of set the tone just based on his perspectives. And he has a couple slides. So I want to call you up. I have your clicker right here. Just kind of give us the overview, the lay of the land for Greater Grand Rapids, and then we'll launch into some questions.
Okay, thank you. So there's a lot of information on the slide, but the high points here is that we grew up as an agency. We started really in 2000 as a takeover from a really failing transit property, and we had passed 4 transit millages over time, and we have been winning awards as apt as best transit system. We won as a small system. We won as a middle-sized system. We have not yet won as a large-sized system. So that's part of the initiative, is how do we keep moving forward. Now, you would think that because we are so successful and we win awards, everything is going well. Well, not really. We are seeing ridership losses. We are seeing ridership losses because gas prices went down. We're seeing ridership losses because Uber is taking part of our work. We're seeing ridership losses because young millennials don't own cars and have different means of going to work, and they are doing things like living as close as they can to work so they don't have to use anything at all except walking, bicycling, transit, or Uber. One of the ways that we try to address these challenges is putting BRTs in place. We had the first bus rapid transit in Michigan. We're about to doing the second one. We thank MDOT for the continued participation in that project because it was very important that we had support for that. That is just one answer. We're in the middle of doing something called the Align, which is studying what people really want and how do we address those needs. That's a very different way of looking at it. So one of the things that we've discovering is with the aging population, we really have a problem meeting the demands. It is very difficult in a regional area where you have an urban core and suburban and almost rural to actually be able to meet the needs of seniors. And it's a higher cost for them because they have to pay more than the regular fare to access the transit system. And that's, with an aging population, that's very difficult. The other thing is trying to get all these new technologies into place so we can help. We're developing smart cards. We have Next Stop system. You can use Google Maps to navigate our area. We're initiating a traffic signal priority project in which we're going to take our most difficult, challenging routes and keep improving the speed so that we can keep a better schedule. And lastly, we're trying to see what are we doing with TNCs, Lyft and Uber? How does that fit in with what we're doing? So if you look at our service area, you see there's a really good spine of routes. And you're also looking at areas in which there is really no service. And the spine is really also a little bit difficult because there's routes on a 15-minute frequency at peak, but all the other routes are a 30-minute frequency. And you try to imagine how you manage your life trying to meet it in a 30-minute frequency. And how do you get to the route in the first place? So this is the urban core that is better served, that has really better access. This is where people are moving out, actually out of the core, right? So that makes it even more challenging. Why are they moving out? Because the urban core, the land prices and the housing prices keep increasing, so it's pushing people out. Then you have these areas that are yellow. That's where new urban development is happening, but it's mostly been starting out with industrial development. And people are putting factories and greenfields and then saying, how does transit get there? And people trying to get to those jobs can't really get to jobs easily. So we have to mix and match projects and how to do that well. In our area, we're using Hope Network to help with that as well. So challenges, balance, coverage versus frequency, fixed route versus mobility on demand, weekday versus weekend, what do people want, what do they need? Greenfield versus brownfield, all the development is going to greenfield and some brownfield, that doesn't help us. Peak service versus all-day service, existing rides versus new riders, all kinds of different challenges. So as we're moving forward, we're trying to understand what this landscape is, how we can create more high-frequency corridors, how do we serve not only the urban core but the rural areas, and how do we put all of these things into place. And frankly, you know, from my viewpoint, 21 years, we built a great system. We only got halfway to where we need to go. Really, I mean, just you say you want awards, everything's great, but we're not able to meet the needs of all the people, and something has to happen. So that's the challenge for my board as I leave, and for the people who are staying there and working. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Peter. And those trends are playing themselves out in communities across the state. So I think that was a great way to kick us off. So I'll start with, I guess, the first question for our other two panelists. From an equipment standpoint, I'll just jump right into it. What is the biggest obstacle you face in meeting the mobility needs of folks with disabilities, seniors, and veterans?
Equipment?
Yes.
We just surveyed our non-riders, and I think the next generation, we need to get where the rapid and some of the more technologically advanced groups are. So we need apps, you know. So we've done as much as we can with dispatchers and texting and emails, and I think our riders are predominantly on demand, dial a ride. They call or text us, and we dispatch buses. So we've gotten about as far as we can. So the next generation, I think we need to be more agile.
Mark?
I'd just say, like, making it less hard. And I mean, I think that idea is different for everyone. You know, if it's a person with a disability, you know, it could just be from how the systems are working from them to information design, to just a single mom who's got to drop two kids off at two different places and then get to a job in the suburbs and all the frictions that she might face. So, you know, what we're really trying to focus on is, as we try these new things, is we're not just trying to sort of create another thing. I mean, I think in our region, we've done a lot of that, and we've suffered from a disease of things that are just out there. As we do things, we need to think of how do we build a system, and one that actually integrates both services, but also the back end as well.
Again, if you have any questions, my phone number is on the board, and also there are blue question cards. Bill, you mentioned technology, and I know that there's some in the populations that we're serving that fear some of this new technology. How do we help people overcome or work around that feeling? Because that feeling is meaningful.
Yeah, so communication with the stakeholders is paramount, and we feel fortunate that New Freedom has offered grant money for a mobility manager that can get out in the community and work with the different populations. Like Director Stile shared, the population, especially in northern Michigan, is getting older. So we have to design systems and communicate the way they want to be communicated with. You know, we always say the golden rule, but it's the platinum rule. You know, meet people where they need to be met. And I think sometimes the human aspect, you can't do that well enough. Rack cards alone won't get it done.
Any of our other panelists?
What's the question?
The question is around new technology and adoption of that new technology and some of the fears around that. If you've thought about that and how to overcome it.
Well, we're addressing those issues all the time with improving how we interface with it. You know, smart card system is one of them. It's a new technology. How do you get people who used to paying with cash using smart cards, using a computer to load value onto a smart card, and how to move on? Younger people do understand how Google Maps work and how they can find our bus in real time, and that really helps them. But other people show up at the bus stop and they don't have that technology. So how do you get that technology in everybody's hands? The mobile phone is essentially going to be part of the ticket because you can have your entire thing on the phone. When the bus is coming, how you pay for it, and everything. But on the other hand, is that really accessible to a lot of people? If you talk to my mother-in-law, the phone is a huge challenge. It's just barely enough for her to answer it rather than to use all this technology to get around. So I think that the challenge is really broadening the ability of people to do that and put it in everybody's hands.
So Trevor, I mean, I think it goes back to your initial slide around design thinking, in the fact that, you know, when we're doing anything new, are we doing it to solve my problem, or are we doing it to solve a customer's problem? And, you know, so I've got a great team on sort of our innovation group that are, you know, startup focused, design thinking based, and you know, have done a lot of this discovery of just going out and talking to people and really understanding their individual stories, but then also taking them ideas to say, is this something you would use? So we're not just basically throwing things out there and saying, you figure this out. We're trying to basically do that as part of the whole process as we're building new types of ideas to implement.
All right. Thank you for all the text in the last 30 seconds. I'm going to try to get through as many as I can. This is for the entire panel. What are the policy blocks? Why does it take so long for a transit agency to launch a pilot and then iterate? And that is from the 616.
Okay, that's money. Money is a big problem. The way we raise our money is property tax. That means you have to have a board that's willing to increase property taxes to improve the system. We did that 4 times, and then we just kind of stopped now, and then see where we're going in the future. That issue of trying to save the property tax, their taxpayer the money versus making customer needs, people needs paramount, is a big challenge, especially in an area where young people are moving to Grand Rapids, but they can't afford to live there. So they got the job downtown, they have to move to the suburbs to go to work. They're doing the reverse thing that their parents did many years ago. The issue is to be able to raise the money to raise the level of services so high that the customer satisfaction is paramount, that the customer is being met, that we carry people, they are human beings and they are customers, and you have to put it at the highest level. And to do that, you need more money than is available from the federal government, from the state government, from the taxpayer, and the challenge is how to make people understand that.
Well, our customers, being in Benzie County, for medical, you would go to Traverse City or Manistee. 3,200 people commute to Traverse City. That's 20% of our population. We need to design services that are more attractive to them. We have great partnerships with our adjacent agencies, but it's this buses without borders concept. I mean, why does service have to stop at the county line? Where do our customers really need to go, and how do we get them there? And how do we leverage those relationships to be efficient? We certainly can't do everything for everyone, but you know, catching that sweet spot, if you had to redraw the state of Michigan, you wouldn't have the county lines where they are right now. But that's how the funding is, which is what Peter was talking about. And so that's clearly a barrier.
Mm-hmm. So I have a couple of questions coming in. The 517 let it off, but there's been a couple after about the
Do you
decline.
know where all these zip codes are? When you say 517,
Yeah,
do you know what that's
Lansing,
from?
Mid-Michigan.
I know
Yeah,
you're good at that.
those
So I want everyone to know
Yeah.
how well
Yeah,
Trevor
we know
knows the state
those
of Michigan.
So the topic seems to be trending about what are the factors around decline in ridership, and how much does it have to do with lack of solutions around first mile, last mile transportation in your minds?
Oh, this is a complex question. Okay, younger people, they don't have cars. A lot of them don't have cars. I have people on my staff who don't have cars, and they're using Uber, or they're using transit, or using bicycle walking, and they will look at their app and say, the bus is going to come in 20 minutes, my Uber will be here in 5, and they'll use Uber, and they don't have a car, they don't have that car payment, so that's one of the elements. And Uber is cutting into our core urban service, and they're better for the last mile, bringing it to the route system. They shouldn't be competing in my corridors, but they are. And so how do you deal with a complexity of issues that are demand? Gas prices going down really hurt because people start getting cars again and paying for gas. And that's national. The transit systems in the United States that are increasing ridership are very few, and what they're doing is they're taking their business and bringing it to the core and trying to get the fringes be covered in some other way. And that's the opposite of what we were doing for the last 20 years. So how do you deal with this challenge? You know, and I got a board member here who wants service outside of our route service. It's the county, and we're only in the urban core, and we're already having a challenge in the urban core. So the issues are more complex about loss of ridership than you think. But if half the population is millennials and they're moving into the workplace and they don't have a car, they're not going to use transit except when it's really convenient for them. And that is a factor. And the customer satisfaction of what that means. I mean, it could be minor little things like having Wi-Fi on your buses to make the customer experience even better. So I think that ridership will only change when the communities decide that public transit is so important that they're going to focus and invest in it. And if you want to look at cities in the United States that do that well, look at Seattle.
And you know, Trevor, I think for the first time in a while, and MDOT folks can correct me, but I thought it was 0.6% statewide. I think ridership went up. And the rural areas, our ridership is double-digit up this year, 12% and 17% last month, because we're deploying resources where we never have gone before. A lot of tourism in Frankfurt and in Traverse City, and I know Beta is really embracing shuttles and supporting the parking challenges in the community and parking decks at Munson Hospital and so forth. So there are creative solutions, and I think it's an exciting time, really. And I think our demand is going up. And then also leveraging these other services. They created NM Ride, Northern Michigan Ride, which is like a dating service for commuters. So, you know, whether Uber and Lyft, and if we can't service somebody, you know, those are really great options. But it costs $16,000 a year for somebody to own a car in Northern Michigan. It's a lot of commuting miles. So I think people are looking for alternatives and trying to get to the urban centers.
Yeah.
So I'll tag on just since you got a lot of text. You know, our ridership in Detroit is stabilized, but we just, you know, some places it's doing better and some places it's doing worse. You know, the Woodward corridor, you know, a year ago, still a year, I can still say this. You know, the only transit service that was running was our bus, which comes every 10 minutes, and the Smart Bus, which was a peak hour. And since then, we've added the Q line, We've kept our service at the same service levels, and Smart has added their fast service, which runs limited stop all day, 15-minute service. And transit is up in that corridor. You know, there was nobody right at the queue line. Our service, even though we've added all these things that quote unquote compete against us, our ridership on the Woodward is up 3%, and Smart's ridership's up like 10 to 15% on that corridor. So you just look at, you know, because we've added all this service on, you know, the main corridor in the city and the region, things are up. And when you look when things are down, you know, it's the things, as Peter said, that run every 45 to 60 minutes, where it's just not a great option for people to get, and it's a legacy route as well that has a lot of work to do. You know, so for us, you know, Seattle's a great model. Looking to Houston as well, as they went and basically broke down their entire system to say what makes sense and what, you know, doesn't make sense, and really having a more a real honest conversation on frequency versus coverage is something I think everybody needs to do, because I think we all have the goal of saying, how do we make it as easy as possible for folks to get around where we serve?
All right, this is for one of the panelists. You guys can choose who gets it. But let's drill down on one of those factors in particular, on-time performance. And going back to the idea of design thinking, how do you identify, how do you empathize? How do you find the challenge or the problem? And then how do you find solutions? Take us through that process in terms of on-time performance.
Okay, on-time performance, if you don't mind.
Please.
Okay, on-time performance is something we're struggling with because our ridership was increasing and certain corridors of congestion was building, and how do you keep the schedule on time? So we're focusing on the worst maintained route in terms of schedule adherence and putting traffic signal priority in the corridor because it's going to improve the speed of the service and keep it on time better. And so we have a multi-year project in which we're going to spend about $400,000 each year to take each corridor and do that to the corridor. Now, our bus rapid transit system has traffic signal priority and has a system that keeps the schedule very well. Partially because of that, partially because we're also we're paying off board and boarding from all doors and moving as if it's a light rail vehicle. So it's moving like a light rail vehicle, not a bus. On a bus service, you go in, you pay the fare box, you pay the fare. You'd be surprised how much time is wasted paying at the fare box. So what we're doing about that is the smart card technology. If you all have a smart card, if you all add money to it, you just tap and board, and you don't have to feed cash in or whatever. That transition of taking people and making them cashless and putting a card in their hands and giving it to them so they can use it, there's a myriad of issues. Now, wait to see autonomous vehicles come in. If you think there's going to be on-time performance with empty cars moving back and forth in the same corridor as you, and you're trying to compete with that, how is congestion going to be managed in that kind of system? On-time performance is going to be continuing a problem unless your population goes in a decline and your transit system has to retrench. That's not what's happening in our area. That's not what's happening nationally.
We've
I
talked
hope
a
that
lot.
answered your question.
I hope you did too.
Yeah.
You're a great listener, Trevor.
What?
You did a great job listening.
Oh, I'm listening. No, it did answer my question.
Okay.
I'm still getting bombarded, so again, I'm trying to get to as many as I can. So we could limit our answers to one or two panelists. We've been talking a lot about cities. I'd like to talk a bit about rural, and Bill, you might be the best person to talk about this. I like this question because it's so specific. This is from the 402. 60% of fatalities in Michigan occur in rural communities. What percentage of rural communities have night, in parentheses, after 8 p.m., and weekend transportation?
I don't know the percentage. It's very low.
Mm-hmm.
The
Do you want to
density-
speak to that overall?
Yeah, it's very low because we can't afford to run into those evening hours. So a lot of our job access for those commuters, we just can't service them. We do have some factory workers that are working 12-hour shifts, and we're just not running there. The fatalities often are blown stop streets and leaving the road. I'm just not the right person to speak on that.
Okay. All right, this is coming in from the Detroit area. I like this question. It starts with two words, who pays? And then it gets into more detail. If the target market is smaller than the mass market, then number one, Do customers simply pay more for a premium service? Or number two, do government, nonprofits, and corporate sponsors subsidize the services in order to cover operational costs that are not able to benefit from economies of scale?
So, I mean, this is what we're trying to do with our pilots, is to understand what our future business model mobility is. We know that, offering a Lyft or Uber for everyone is not a sustainable way to do business. But if we start looking at, when we're running service at 3 o'clock in the morning, it begins to say, like, what's the best way to get folks around at that time? And it might be a combination of fixed route and something a little bit more flexible. But really understanding that number, as well as sort of like what return we'll get on investing more money, is important. But I think that needs to be part of pilots and doing these types of projects, is understanding of how are you actually going to sustainably keep this going.
So I'm getting a couple questions about, and as people are taking notes, they're trying to categorize your answers. So I think really this question is more just a lightning round type question. So based on some of the challenges that you have that you're going to go back to either later today or tomorrow, can you rank them? Priority 1 to 3, each of you, really quick, so people can begin to create a structure around the conversation.
1, 2, 3, okay. One is the millennials, the people that are moving up in the generation are finding it hard to live in the inner city and are moving out, and they don't want to have a car, but they want transit to be accessible. 2, people with disabilities have really a hard time getting around. And our system is not designed in such a way that it's easy for them to get to the root system in the first place. So they get on a smaller vehicle and do their whole trip that way. And it's not the best thing for freedom and independence, but it works. Seniors are really the worst situation in my mind, because they're living further out. They can't access the system. They have a difficulty doing that, and they don't get out in life as much, and they could. And how do you answer the need? So for them to pay, it costs a lot more, and they don't have enough money. So that's in my order.
For us, and Stacy and Mickey will probably yell at me afterwards, I think one is just being able to communicate something new, getting the word out there, and then and having people try something new. I mean, that's a big one. The second being, and I don't know if this is sort of priority, so I apologize, it's coming off the head, how we think through of how we integrate this, because I think that as we try new things, like what we don't want to do is create a bunch of closed systems. Like, I don't want to have a fixed route system and then a system is getting people to the hospital and a system is getting people to jobs. Like, it just needs to be a system that works for everybody. But while people might have different options and different abilities to pay, making sure this is all working towards a whole is a big piece. And then the third B is just the barriers that exist with people that don't have access to a credit card and don't have access to a cell phone, or at least the ability to use that cell phone at all times, that have a limited data plan, that there needs to be low-tech solutions as well as with technology solutions. Because I think I'll be very loud to you. If you come to me with a solution that doesn't work for every Detroiter, I will say that's not a solution that's going to work in Detroit and tell you to leave. As these things come through, this needs to work for everyone in our city. And that's a very bottom line thing, and that's hard, particularly for how a lot of these solutions have been focused on demographics that have cell phones and have credit cards and haven't really dove into some of those challenges.
Yeah, so in the rural areas, non-emergency medical transportation is really a problem. Getting folks inter-county connectivity, and frankly, it's funding of that. The Affordable Care Act, had this great vision, and doctors will tell you that their inefficiencies are often caused because folks aren't getting to their appointments. And number one, it's transportation. So that's the challenge, and especially in rural areas.
This next question is from Brian. We see that the baby boomers population is pretty savvy with a cell phone for texting, but maybe doesn't understand all of the apps. But for the elderly, especially my grandparents, they won't even use text, let alone an app. How do we support the learning curve for the elderly on these technologies, knowing that the next wave of elderly could be us and won't need to be taught how to use them? So I asked a similar version of that question earlier, but I specifically want to focus on the elderly because I don't know if we've yet talked a lot about that particular population. So if anyone wants to tackle this one, it's all yours.
Well, you know, we have staff or we have agencies that can help mentor them and move forward. It's a huge challenge. I mean, I myself struggled with my mom and dad when they were alive. They could use transit and they just didn't want to deal with it. They didn't want to deal with the phone. They didn't want to deal with finding out. And so it's a question of mentoring them and showing them how to do it and actually being with them and doing it with them. That's a huge challenge because that's not where their mindset is. I don't need to teach young people anything about the phone. I'm learning from them. It's the older people that it's very hard because they don't even want to deal with an iPhone. They'd rather have their old phone.
Yeah, and similarly, outreach, bus buddies, connecting at the COA, at the gathering place, and that first ride is the hardest. It's just like going to Metro for the first time, right? It can be overwhelming.
Right.
So whatever we can do, it does take that kind of exceptional one-on-one service.
Okay.
So, I haven't talked to you about this, so
Please.
I apologize what I'm about
Go
to say. You know, I think that the opportunity for this program begins to not just say, like, here's some money for everybody and go do something, but it's how do you create the collective learning that's about to go on from an $8 million investment? And whether that's a university partner or somebody else to begin to actually study what's going on and talk to people that are using these things. Because a senior in a rural area versus a senior in Detroit, the reason they might both just say, I'm not going to use a cell phone. And like we say, well, then the cell phone's the problem. But we haven't gotten to the core problem of why they're not using a cell phone, right? Like it might be two different things. And I think that, this state is a diverse state with, very rural and very urban. And this project offers an opportunity for us to do an incredible amount of learning as the future of mobility advances, how do we make it work for everyone in the state so it's just easier for everyone to get around. So I apologize, just put more on your plate.
No, you're fine. So I'm going to get away from technology myself and go blue card. I got you. Someone sent this in like 20 minutes ago. I got you. All right, so I'm going to read it, and then I kind of going to add to it. Post-adoption, the next main challenge is system maintenance and its ability to adapt to new changes. How can transit providers proactively plan for iterative change instead of running systems that are no longer relevant? So for the purposes of this challenge, I'd like you to answer the question, but I also want you to talk about what you're looking for in terms of a maintenance plan once this 3 to 6 month pilot kind of goes successfully. Is that something that's too far down the road, or you guys want to see that from your responses?
Well, just from my personal view, overall, it's just more service and less capital focus. And I think even to that point of view, I don't want to buy a 16-person vehicle, a 12-person vehicle, an 8-person vehicle, and hope that those work, but then also get stuck with having to keep those vehicles up and buying the new vehicles. I'm much more interested in sort of exploring the idea of like, we're running buses, and we're running big buses, and we're going to run big buses really well. But for other types of services, understanding how we can think through contracting that type of service out.
Yeah, and to that, the bus replacement program arguably is flawed. If you can get 2 smaller vehicles for the price of 1 vehicle, then maybe right-sizing our fleets is one of the ways to become more agile and to meet the needs of the community at a lower cost.
Another question that's coming in, a couple actually. What about autonomous vehicles? What's your view on autonomous vehicles?
They're coming. They're coming faster than you think.
As it relates to a solution right now.
It's not a solution. It's a challenge. The autonomous vehicle could be a solution maybe because, yes, maybe there's more safety out there, but the autonomous vehicles are going to be really good for last mile, first mile, bring you to a transit service type of situation. But if you send the car into the inner core and send it back out again and send it in again, and half the time it's empty and you're adding congestion, I see that there is a place for it, but you really have to analyze what that is, and you're not going to start seeing it until you start putting it into place and you say, now we have a problem, or now we have a solution. But it's coming, and it's coming in all out. I mean, there's going to be autonomous buses. And if you don't think that's a challenge, wait to see what happens to your labor force when the bus is driving itself. And where do you have customer satisfaction when you can't talk to anybody?
So I honestly don't care what type of vehicle gets a Detroiter to a job, right? Like, it could spew a ton of diesel if it's getting people there. Like, that's the challenge we need to get to. What I'm most interested in is just to sort of piggyback on Peter's point is, if that person, like, we're very focused, and I'm sure Peter's as well, like, and that's a lot of their fair stuff is like, we want our operators to be driving, right? And that needs to be their focus, not worrying about fare payment and doing other things in the bus. But if that position isn't there, what other services can we start to offer? If we're running an autonomous, 8-person shuttle, I'm open to the idea of continuing to pay for someone to be in that vehicle, but doing something other than driving. And whether that's offering some sort of wraparound service, job training, things like that we could start to do when we have a captive audience and we're just paying for that one person. That's what I'm interested in learning when it comes to autonomous pilots. I'm not interested in learning of I'm interested in how people adapt and adopt a new technology. That's interesting, but that's something that will be cultural. I'm really interested in like how we can make people's lives better by using this technology of what we can actually do inside a vehicle.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Autonomous vehicles in a BRT corridor, that works. It works like light rail. You get in, you get out, you go, you move quick. But some of our most high ridership routes in service is because of one particular bus driver. It's one individual that's relating to others. And the ones where it's a little lower is they don't like that bus driver. They're waiting for the other bus. So there is some of that choice out there. And it's the same thing with our paratransit service. They like some drivers more than the other drivers. And it's that public interface, that feeling good about the transit system starts with the driver. If you get rid of all of them, what are you going to do about it?
Well, guys, it's the home stretch. I got a couple more questions for you. What else is trending here is cooperation between transit authorities, and it's right up trending next to modes of transportation. So those are the two things I think I've received like 8 to 10 questions on a piece. So I guess talk to me about how you want folks in industry, some of the other folks in the crowd that are going to be involved in this RFP, how do you want them to address regional collaboration? And with that, there's different modes, right? I mean, it's going to be different if, let's say, a retiree needs to go 2 miles versus a millennial that needs to go 20. So talk about, again, number one, cooperation between regional transit authorities, and 2, modes of transportation and how they intermingle or how they're separate. Gave you a lot there, so whoever wants to go.
We have state associations that bring the transit directors together, and I think the cooperation level is very high. And as I said earlier, though, the funding is kind of the challenge. We're funded third. So a millage gives us a third of our funding, and the state matches at about 39%. And then federal is 18-19%, plus the fare box is only 10%, in a rural area. So how am I a good steward with that money? And if most of my folks want to go to Traverse City and need for jobs or for medical access, then that relationship has to be symbiotic, and we have to get over any barriers. But we also have to be efficient. We can't be riding our buses across county lines all over inefficiently. We have to work at that together. So what I'm excited about is the folks in the room understand that, and the technology is out there. So if we can make our systems more efficient and work collaboratively, because we have different dispatch systems that won't talk to each other, but at the state level, they are looking for NEMT at systems that will work together. So it's integrating those systems. The cooperation level, I think, is pretty high. I think we can get there.
Anyone else?
As a regional authority, we only serve 6 cities. And then there's this whole rural area all around us that is not really being served well. And we could collaborate very well with Muskegon County and Ottawa County on services, but there's these gaps in between. There is no service in those gaps either. And so how do you do that? Within ourselves even, I would say, we have an urban city and we have 5 suburban cities. And what the urban needs are is a little bit different from what the suburban needs are, and because they're all on my board, I see the tension all the time between all those elements. And so the first thing is, and it's very collaborative. I mean, you're talking about people who raised millage rates for 4 times to improve services. They're pretty collaborative. But when you're looking at the needs, you know, one city says, what I'm doing, I need some service here, and you can't give it to me. And then, in the city, I mean, Josh Naramore is here, and he's going to tell you the city matters to him because that's where he is, and he wants service in some corridors where we're not providing service, right, Josh? So how do you manage that process of satisfying everybody's needs and making sure everybody's part of the big kumbaya on great transit? It takes a champion, and I would say that you need to find your champions. You need to find, whether it's in the business, where it's somebody else, somebody's going to champion that, because it's not, most likely not going to be a politician. Most likely, and if it is, they might lose their job like they just did in Nashville practically, because they're challenging that out there. So and I think, you know, the business community and the disability community and the senior community, they all got to get together and say, let's solve the problem, let's find who the champion is. Maybe it's your Chamber of Commerce. Go for it, you know, because if you don't have that champion, you're not going to take leaps and bounds.
So, Mark, you have a very interesting situation given the relationship with the suburbs and regional transit. So I'm really interested to hear your sort of take on collaboration, but then also modes, because it's such a large area.
So there's challenges on our elected side. But yeah, I mean, if you have ideas that can work for us, SMART, and the ride, that's interesting. You know, I think that we're on sort of a staff agency level working better now than we ever have before. So yeah, I mean, don't feel like you have to pick one. I think that we're interested because what we're trying to focus on is between Ann Arbor and downtown Detroit, there's a seamless experience between all the transit that's running there. So yeah.
Okay. Well, guys, I think we did it. It's not easy to come up here and answer questions, especially when you don't know which ones are coming. So thank you so much.